Did you know that Allan Kardec, recognized as the founder of Spiritism, compiled a definitive list of thoughts in the Spirit's book that are considered the most hazardous for attracting troublesome entities? The knowledge you are about to receive is far more than a simple concept. It's a critical insight that could clarify why your existence appears to be constantly under duress from unfavorable forces, while others seem to navigate life with unwavering inner peace. In this video, I'm not just going to disclose what these specific thought patterns are, but I will also equip you with effective strategies to permanently shield yourself from their influence. Kardec didn't dream this up. Over many decades, he conducted interviews with countless higher-level and lower-level spirits to pin down the mental habits that make us susceptible targets. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever felt like certain ideas or thoughts in your head seem to draw in more hardship and negativity, almost as if they were cursed? Get ready, because in the following minutes, your understanding of reality will be thoroughly shaken. I'm going to share 3 major revelations that have the potential to forever change your spiritual journey. First, you will learn about the 5 distinct categories of thought that act as powerful magnets for less evolved spirits. Second, you will gain insight into the precise mechanism these obsessors use to locate and exploit your mental vulnerabilities. And third, you will be taught the specific methods that medium Chico Xavier was given by his spiritual guides to neutralize these negative influences before they consume you entirely. The most essential principle to grasp is that your thoughts are not merely electrical activity within your brain. That's a common misconception. Allan Kardec's extensive research led him to discover that every thought you generate emits what he termed fluidic waves, which travel throughout the spiritual dimension, much like radio signals. The spirits of obsession, who reside in the darker realms of the spiritual world, are ceaselessly monitoring these mental frequencies, seeking out souls whose vibrations align with their own detrimental tendencies. But now comes the part that will truly open your eyes and fundamentally alter your perception of your own internal dialogue. In question 469 of the Spirit's book, Kardec directly asked the elevated spirits, which thoughts most facilitate the action of obsessing spirits upon those in the physical body? The answer he received is so explicit that it serves as a veritable spiritual self-defense manual. The first category of thought that attracts obsessors is what Kardec labeled malice or backbiting. This goes beyond just slandering others when they aren't around. It is the mental predisposition to judge, criticize, and obsessively find fault in those around you, even if you never speak your criticisms aloud. When your mind is consistently fixed on the mistakes and shortcomings of others, you are sending out vibrations of false superiority and deep-seated resentment. Obsessing spirits who shared these exact inclinations when they were alive are magnetically drawn to these energy frequencies. The renowned psychic Edgar Cayce affirmed this concept in his readings, explaining that souls connect based on vibrational compatibility. If you are constantly emitting energy of judgment and fault-finding, you will attract spiritual entities whose specialty is sowing discord and promoting conflict. Have you noticed that the people who criticize others the most often seem to have the most complicated and drama-filled lives themselves? This is by no means a coincidence. But hold on, because the second type of thought is even more hazardous. Allan Kardec documented that thoughts centered on vengeance and hatred serve as glaring beacons in the lower spiritual world. Obsessing spirits who passed away full of bitter feelings and a desperate desire for retribution are irresistibly pulled toward minds that cultivate these intense emotions. I'll share a real-life case documented by Chico Xavier in just a few minutes, concerning a man who harbored vengeful thoughts against his former boss for years, unaware he was being influenced by the spirit of a murderer. In the meantime, you must understand this. When you cling to resentment against someone who has wronged you, you are not alone in those thoughts. Kardec found that lower spirits feed on these destructive emotions, amplifying them to keep their victims locked in a perpetual cycle of bitterness. The medium Divaldo Franco explains that resentment functions like an open wound in your perispirit, the spiritual body. Obsessing spirits possess the ability to detect these spiritual injuries from a great distance and use them as entry points to sway your thoughts and emotional state. The third thought pattern that acts as an attractor for obsessors is what Kardec described as spiritual greed or covetousness. This is not restricted to merely the love of money, but encompasses any kind of intense selfishness where your material desires are prioritized over the well-being of others. When your mind is constantly preoccupied with questions like, what can I acquire? How can I get more? Or why do others possess what I lack? You are broadcasting the same vibrations that define spirits who died enslaved by insatiable material desire. These obsessing spirits search for physically embodied victims through whom they can vicariously continue to indulge in the sensations of accumulation and worldly power that consumed them during their life. Edgar Cayce's readings indicated that many contemporary forms of obsession related to compulsive consumption, shopping addiction, and a frantic pursuit of social status originate from the influence of spirits who departed this life dominated by these very same addictions. Now for the case I promised, documented in Chico Xavier's records. Roberto, a 38-year-old Brazilian accountant, worked at a construction firm in Minas Gerais. For 2 years he was involved in a legal battle with his ex-supervisor, who had wrongfully terminated him and refused to pay a large settlement. What started as a legitimate quest for justice slowly devolved into an obsession with revenge. Roberto spent hours every day devising ways to destroy his former boss's reputation and business. He went to sleep and woke up with hateful thoughts and detailed plans for retaliation. During this time, Roberto started exhibiting alarming symptoms. He suffered violent nightmares in which he committed horrific acts of revenge. By day, aggressive thoughts invaded his mind with a frightening intensity. His temperament changed drastically. He became irritable with his family, lost interest in hobbies he once enjoyed, and developed a growing paranoia that everyone was conspiring against him. Roberto's wife, familiar with spiritist teachings, convinced him to seek help at a spiritist center. During a disobsession session, the spiritual mentors, speaking through Chico Xavier, revealed that Roberto was being influenced by the spirit of a man who had died in prison after murdering his own employer in a fit of rage and vengeance. But here is the most astonishing detail of the story. The obsessing entity had not stumbled upon Roberto by chance. For months, the persistent vibrations of revenge that Roberto was emitting acted as a radio signal, drawing in spirits with identical destructive tendencies. Bezerra de Menezes explained via Chico Xavier that this kind of spiritual attachment is incredibly common. Spirits who die dominated by vengeful feelings become trapped in the lower planes of the spiritual realm, continuously reliving the moments of hatred that destroyed them in life. When they encounter living individuals who foster similar thoughts, they seize an opportunity to vicariously re-experience the sensations of rage and vengeance through the minds of their human hosts. Roberto's liberation process required several months of dedicated spiritual effort. He had to learn not only to forgive his former boss, but also to fundamentally transform his habitual patterns of thinking. Bezerra de Menezes, through Chico Xavier, taught that the most genuine defense against obsessors is not found in external ceremonies or rituals, but in the profound inner transformation of our own consciousness. Next is the fourth thought category, which acts like a beacon for the darkest spiritual influences. Allan Kardec recorded that thoughts of despair and self-destruction attract what he termed suicidal spirits. These are souls who prematurely ended their physical lives and are now trapped in a state of confusion and deep suffering in the spiritual dimension. When a person on earth constantly harbors thoughts such as, "I can't endure this any longer, life is meaningless," or "it would be better if I were dead," they are emitting vibrations that perfectly resonate with these tormented spirits. Suicidal spirits, in their confusion and pain, are frantically seeking relief from their own suffering. When they detect minds vibrating at similar frequencies of hopelessness, they attempt to sway them toward making the same destructive decisions they once made. Divaldo Franco has documented chilling instances of people who developed suicidal ideations seemingly out of the blue, only to discover later that they were being influenced by spirits who had ended their lives under comparable circumstances. Edgar Cayce also issued a warning about this phenomenon in his readings, explaining that individuals experiencing severe depression become particularly susceptible to what he called the influence of lost entities. But here is a point that may shift your understanding of depression and negative thinking. Not all despairing or self-destructive impulses originate solely within the mind of the person experiencing them. Allan Kardec found that many instances of sudden and inexplicable depression result from the spiritual influence of entities who project their own desperate emotional states onto receptive minds. This absolutely does not mean that we should disregard professional medical and psychological help. On the contrary, Kardec taught that true healing must address physical, psychological, and spiritual dimensions simultaneously. The fifth and final thought category that draws obsessors is what Kardec termed unbridled sensuality. This includes not only obsessive sexual thoughts, but any pursuit of gratification that completely disregards moral or spiritual consequences. Spirits who died enslaved by addictions and vices become stuck in the lower spiritual realms, where they continue to feel the same compulsive urges that dominated them in life. These spirits desperately seek out embodied individuals through whom they can vicariously satisfy their addictions. They are attracted to minds that constantly cultivate thoughts of instant pleasure without considering the long-term impact. Chico Xavier received from the spirit André Louis detailed accounts of how these entities operate. They approach their targets during periods of vulnerability, especially during sleep or states of intoxication, and inject suggestions that intensify compulsive desires. Now, here is the practical advice you can implement immediately for protection. Allan Kardec revealed that the most effective defense against obsessors is not complex rituals or charms, but what he called the constant vigilance over our own thoughts. In the Spirit's book, question 470, Kardec asked, "What is the most effective means of combating the influence of evil spirits?" The answer was unmistakable: do good and place complete trust in God. Yet, there are specific techniques that Chico Xavier learned from his spiritual mentors to interrupt negative mental habits before they invite unwanted influences. The first technique is what Emmanuel called immediate substitution. The exact moment you recognize a thought from one of the dangerous categories, malice, vengeance, greed, despair, or compulsive desire, you must instantly replace it with its spiritual opposite. If you catch yourself criticizing someone, immediately think of something positive about that person, even if you have to search for it. If a vengeful thought arises, instantly send thoughts of forgiveness toward the one who hurt you. Emmanuel explained to Chico Xavier that this practice must become as automatic as pulling your hand away from a hot stove. The goal is not to suppress negative thoughts, but to train your mind to prevent them from taking root and growing. The second technique is the neutralizing prayer that Bezerra de Menezes specifically taught for moments of mental temptation. When you feel negative thoughts gaining momentum, immediately say this phrase mentally: "Lord, remove from me every thought that is not one of love and peace." This simple yet potent prayer instantly shifts your vibrational frequency, making your mind incompatible with lower spiritual influences. The third technique is the protective visualization that André Louis described in his communications through Chico Xavier. When you detect that your mind is being bombarded by negative concepts, immediately envision a white and golden light encompassing your head and spreading to your entire body. This visualization is more than mere imagination. André Louis explained that by visualizing this light with sincere faith, we activate real energies from the perispirit that establish a protective vibrational boundary against negative influences. But there is one more crucial detail about the precise timing of these techniques. Emmanuel disclosed to Chico Xavier that there is a window of opportunity of approximately 30 seconds from the moment a negative thought first appears until it solidifies into a dominant mental pattern. During that critical 30-second interval, you retain full power to redirect your mind toward higher thoughts. If you let this time pass without conscious intervention, the negative thought gains momentum and becomes far more difficult to dislodge. Edgar Cayce supported this principle in his readings, explaining that the human mind has choice points where it can change direction. The key is to recognize these moments and act without delay. Divaldo Franco documents instances of people who completely transformed their spiritual lives simply by applying this 30-second vigilance over their thoughts. Now here is an explanation for why some people seem to be naturally more susceptible to obsession than others. Kardec identified what he termed magnetic temperaments, which cause certain individuals to be more sensitive to spiritual influences, both positive and negative. People with heightened mediumistic sensitivity, for example, may be more vulnerable to obsessors, but they also possess a greater capacity to connect with higher spirits when they focus their thoughts on goodness. Chico Xavier, who possessed an extraordinary mediumistic sensitivity, was specifically trained by Emmanuel to maintain constant watch over his thoughts. For over 60 years, he never allowed his mind to dwell on thoughts of criticism, revenge, or any other pattern that could invite negative influences. This profound mental discipline not only shielded him from obsessors, but also kept him in permanent alignment with his superior spiritual mentors. However, you don't need to be a medium to benefit from these profound lessons. Emmanuel clarified that every human being is constantly receiving influences from the spiritual realm. The deciding factor lies in the type of influences we draw in through our habitual feelings and internal dialogue. When you consistently cultivate thoughts of love, forgiveness, gratitude, and service to the common good, you become magnetically attractive to higher spirits who vibrate at those same frequencies. When you habitually allow your mind to dwell on criticism, resentment, greed, despair, or compulsive desire, you inevitably attract lower spirits who seek to experience those negative states through receptive minds. The choice is entirely yours, moment by moment, thought by thought. Allan Kardec revealed that human free will is absolutely respected by the spiritual world. No spirit, whether high or low, can force you to think or feel a certain way, but all can influence you to the degree that you permit that influence through your own mental choices. Spiritual obsession is not something that merely happens to you as a passive victim. It is the natural consequence of mental patterns that you consciously allow to be nurtured and established in your mind. This means you also possess the complete power to free yourself from any negative influence, simply by changing the regular direction of your thoughts. Bezerra de Menezes taught through Chico Xavier that genuine spiritual liberation begins with the mastery of one's own mind. When you learn to consciously steer your thoughts toward the good, you become a collaborator with your spiritual guides rather than a victim of lower spirits. In the coming weeks, commit to implementing the 30-second vigilance over your mind. Every time you detect one of the 5 perilous patterns, malice, vengeance, greed, despair, or compulsive desire, immediately redirect your mind to its spiritual counterpart. Initially, it may feel challenging and demand continuous effort, but Emmanuel promised that with persistent practice, this watchfulness becomes automatic and transforms not just your spiritual life, but your entire experience of living. When you elevate the quality of your habitual thoughts, you change the nature of the spirits drawn to you. And when you change the nature of your spiritual influences, you change your destiny. Tired of uncertainty? The wisdom of Allan Kardec in our ebook will revolutionize your perspective and illuminate your path. Don't wait.